Meanwhile, the Reserve Bank of India Governor D. Subbarao sounded hawkish. He said that inflation is still too high. Also stressed that the central bank needs to reduce inflation to 5% or lower. Sounding a little helpless, he added that the RBI has less room to drive monetary policy as compared to during the financial crisis of 2008 and 9, as economists were worried about deflation at that time. Meanwhile, even as the government gets set to announce Q1 GDP numbers on Friday, the government has rather quietly revised downwards earlier GDP data for fiscal years 2009 and 10. Growth in the fourth quarter of FY09 has now been revised downwards by the Central Statistics Office from the earlier 5.9% to a much lower 3.5%. And for the first quarter of FY10 has been revised downwards from 6.3% to 5.7%. Joining us on the show tonight, Sunil Sinha, head and senior economist at Crisil. Mr. Sinha, thanks so much for joining us. Firstly, what do you make of this revision, the downward revision? You know, we've already been seeing various kinds of revisions and all kinds of data, which has been a cause of concern as to the credibility of the data that we're seeing and therefore the kind of judgments we can make with it. But the GDP figures that we've got today, what do you make of them?
Well, I mean, these revisions certainly put a question mark on the robustness of the data collection, which helps the CSO to, finally calculate the GDP. It's not that the data revision has happened for the first time. We have been kind of seeing data revision for a number of years now. However, what is interesting or intriguing is that typically when the growth rates were high, most of the data revisions were on the upside. That simply means that somewhere the GDP was underestimated. But when the downturn came, perhaps the same set of data collection and the same methodology gave us a number which in a way turned out to be an overestimation. And now when these numbers are revised downwards, so I mean it's a peculiar situation that and I think we still don't have a very credible answer from the government agency as to why this is happening.
Right. And given that the GDP situation is where it's at right now, Mr. Sinha, inflation continues to be a concern. We just heard the governor today talking about how inflation is still above where he would like to see it. A very hawkish tone at that. What are you anticipating from the figures that we're expecting on Friday?
Well, I mean, the first quarter figure are not going to be very encouraging because some of the early indications that have come either through the IIP numbers or through the export numbers, all of them clearly indicate that the first quarter is going to be, somewhat on the similar lines like we had seen the fourth quarter of last fiscal. However, when we look at either the industry or services, perhaps some solace for the first quarter would come from the agricultural sector, which did reasonably well last fiscal, and we had a record food grain production. So it is only the agricultural sector which probably will be somewhat as per the expected lines. But that's it. I mean, going forward in the
Mr. Sinha, if you're saying
second, third, fourth quarter again.
Right. So if you're saying that it's going to be more or less status quo, my question to you is then, with growth where it's at and inflation where it's at, what can we expect in terms of monetary policy from here onwards? Because at this point of time, it doesn't look like there is going to be any crack in this logjam we're seeing between inflation and growth. And how long is that going to last?
Well, I mean, RBI has been clearly indicating that, unless and until fiscal policy or the fiscal deficit is contained, they simply do not have the monetary, room available to do anything on the, with regard to the policy rates. So their primary concern would continue to be, the inflation, And given the fact that inflation is high and there are expectations, I mean, given the monsoon failure and also, various kinds of revision, whether it is fuel prices or electricity prices due over the next couple of months, inflation will remain on the higher side. So I don't see in this kind of a scenario, even if the growth is dwindling, where is the scope for, monetary easing?
Right. So just a final question then to you, Mr. Sinha. Today we had a new economic advisor, start his term in office. The fiscal deficit is, of course, one of our biggest concerns right now, and the ongoing, debate between what should get priority at this point between growth and inflation continues to, of course, be this overhang over the economy. What do you think his first priority should be as he resumes office?
Well, I mean, I just heard him saying that, when you look at the overall growth scenario in India, then it's true that part of the slowdown is due to the global factors, and part of the slowdown is obviously due to the domestic factors. So, I mean, given his vast experience, if he says that he has some useful tips which can help at least the economy, the Indian economy to fight the global slowdown better, perhaps, that would be very handy. But on the whole, given the fact that we are still largely domestic demand driven economy, I mean, the key lies with how you handle the domestic economy, not so much how you actually handle the external economy.
All right, Mr. Sinha, thanks so much for joining us tonight on The Final Word. And that's an interesting takeaway there, that focus right now should be on what's happening right here.